All right, 8th graders, today we're going to be talking about percents, both how to model percents and writing them as fractions. So what's important to know is that, I guess I should say, a percent is a ratio. There's why we're building, right? A percent is a ratio of a number to, remember, because a ratio always has 2 in it, 100. So the word percent means per 100. So really, out of every 100, how many are there? That's what a percent is. So when we're modeling percent, we would use a 10 by 10 grid. So I would start here and count down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So maybe we should do 5 by and then cut them in half. So if I did 5, I would say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and draw a line here. So maybe if you have a different color marker or something, you could do the outside of your grids nice. And then you can switch back to pencil. So then I would split all of these in half so that I would have 10. Right? And then I would make 4, 2, 3, 4, and then split all of these in half so that I had 10 that way. So then I should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So here I have 5, and I'm splitting them in half so that I have 10. And then here I'm going to make 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Remember, 4 lines make 5 spaces. So now I have 5 spaces, and I'm going to split those in half so that again I have 10 by 10. Doesn't have to be perfect. Your models will be, because they will be made for you. But if I was modeling, say, 8% out of 100, that means I have 8 out of 100. So I would just color in 8 of these. 8 little squares. Right? If I was modeling 95%, I would have to color in 95 of these squares, so all but 5. So I'm going to kind of box out what I'm not going to color in. Okay, so I'm going to draw a couple more grids for you. Go ahead and draw a couple more grids. Remember, we're going to split these in half. Maybe I'll just do 2 at a time so that we can split the other ways. And then I'm going to do 4 lines so that I have 5 spaces. And then I'm going to split these in half. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so not the prettiest, but you get the idea. So now if I have 47%, I would color in how many of these cubes? Or squares, I guess? 47. Good. So each row we know is 10, so I'm going to do 4 full rows. because I know that's 40. And then I'm going to do all but 3 of the next row so that it is 47. All right, what if I had these shaded and wanted you to tell me what percent it was? So let's see, how about I shade these 3 rows and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 more. So if I had 3 rows and then 6 more, how many squares would that be? So I would ask you, what percent does that represent? What do you think? You would count all those squares, so 10, 20, 30, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, so 36%. Okay? So you'll have to do some of both. Now sometimes you might ask, okay, well, how would you represent a number like 173%? Sometimes we do have things more than 100. Well, 100 would be a whole, so you would have a whole thing colored in, right? A whole grid. And then on the other one, you would have how many? You would have 73 to color in here, right? So like all but 3, so it would be close to this. And then you would count out 1, 2, 3. So 7 rows, and then 3 more. Does that make sense? I was trying to do it without having you draw another grid. So the other thing that we are going to do today is write a fraction as a percent. So to write a percent as a fraction, I'd say this is really important, right? To write a percent as a fraction, you're going to write it with a denominator of 100 and then simplify. Okay? So if I asked you to write 75%, well, you know that 75 out of 100 is like 75 cents, so like 3/4. But in order to get that for things that we don't know, you're always going to write that number out of 100 and then simplify. So I'm thinking, what things can go into both? Well, I know 25 can go into both, so I would divide the top and the bottom by 25, which would give me 3 on the top and 4 on the bottom. Some things might really not be as nice, but remember, you're going to take the greatest common factor and divide them both by their greatest common factors, just like we have been doing, which is why it's so important that you've been staying with us. So 28% we would write as 28 out of 100. Well, if you couldn't figure out the greatest common factor, maybe you're struggling, you could think about it as they're both even and start with dividing them both by 2. So that would be 14 and 50. But now you still notice, oh shoot, they're both still even. So then you have to divide them by 2 again, which is fine. You can totally do it this way. But it may have been shorter if you saw that they both have a factor of 4 that you could have divided out. But that's okay. You're still going to get the answer, right? But don't stop here because they're both even. They both can still be divided by something other than 1. 14 divided by 2 is 7. And 50 divided by 2 is like 2/4 going to 50 cents, right? I always like to think of money because we know money really well. Okay, should we try a few more of these? I'm going to go ahead and keep them on this same page just so that you only have one page of notes and we have some extra room to work with. But if you're out of room, please feel free to move on to another page. 65%. Remember, we're going to write it out of 100. So we're going to write 65 out of 100. And I like this one because they end in a 5 or a 0, which I know 5 will go into. So I would divide them both by 5. Hmm, 13 times and 20 times. I know because I think of 6.5 times 2. And that's as simplified as that fraction gets. Now, sometimes you might have more than 100 again, right? You might have 140%. You're still going to write that 140 out of 100. And remember, that is really a improper fraction. So you could take 100 out of this to get a whole number. So we can change it into a mixed number. And then I have 40 out of 100. Well, then I have to simplify that 40 out of 100 still, right? I can take 10 out by crossing out a 0 for both, and now I'm going to divide them both by 2. And when I divide them both by 2, I still have one whole here. 4 divided by 2 is 2. 10 divided by 2 is 5. Okay, so just some examples of things that you might see on today's assignment. Have a great Monday.